Hello, women in tech and women in tech supporters, and welcome to the Beta in Real Talks. My name is Carly, aka Delta.
And my name is Adriana, aka Leanie, and we are your hosts and the creators of Beta, a fictional series about how two very different women, Leanie and Delta, learn how to empower each other to lead in the tech industry.
But to support the larger dialogues on women's empowerment in tech and to highlight the importance of representation in both technology and entertainment, two industries that are designing our future, we decided to promote Beta the series with this really cool Real Talks program with the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship here in Chicago. And this is a talk show where women talk to women about their journey in the tech industry and how to empower more women to lead in tech.
We are so excited today, this week for our Real Talk. We bring you Alexis Cox, Creative Technology Lead at Google. But before we introduce you to Alexis, we want to bring first up our trailer for Beta the series and introduce you to the two fictional characters, Leanie and Delta, that were inspired by women like Alexis. So enjoy our trailer and we'll be right back.
Oh my God, I hate my job. Just tell them that.
You got me fired.
You got me fired.
You got me fired.
Are you kidding me?
That's me, Leanie. This is Delta. She was my boss.
Exhale. You're good. You're good.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I think you should be an entrepreneur.
Leanie, do you know what that word means?
I know this is something you've always wanted. Now's the time. And the tech industry is all the rage right now.
80% of businesses fail within the first 18 months.
This is gonna be so exciting.
You are brilliant.
I am?
Yes.
What did I say?
I don't want you getting involved in my personal life. You know nothing about me.
I'm your friend.
We are not friends.
A flower never competes with a flower beside it. It just blooms.
What about goggles that recognize images?
Like Google goggles?
Exactly. Oh, I see why that's a problem.
I never realized that we were so much on the same page.
We're totally in the same boat.
So we're going worldwide, baby.
Delta, I was gonna show you that we could.
Hi.
Hi. I just love that trailer.
Isn't it fun?
It's so
we like it too. We're so excited to have you here today, Alexis. Thank you for joining us. And before we actually jump in, we just wanted to let anybody who's watching live know that there will be time for questions at the end. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and put those into the chat and we'll get to them at the end.
Perfect. And before we jump into our questions, Alexis, we'd love to have you give us a little intro. Tell us, what does Creative Technology Lead mean? Give us a little blurb.
I'd love to give you a little blurb. So, I mean, to be perfectly honest, creative technology is an emerging field, and it is exactly as it sounds. It's creative uses of technology. And so primarily what I end up doing is using technology to do something new, or using new technology to also do something new. But it's often in an effort to showcase a new product or showcase a new technology to the world.
Awesome. Does it kind of fall into the category of marketing innovation? Do they flirt?
So none of these titles are really, well, creative technologist is a title now, but it wasn't, I would say, a few years ago. Marketing innovation was the title I slapped on it. So if you've seen my LinkedIn, you'll see that, because that's what I was calling it. Because a lot of these events or campaigns that were supported by new technologies were in marketing, because honestly, that's also where a lot of the money is. So it's nice to be innovative with some budget. Yeah, so that's why that marketing innovation was there too.
Gotcha.
And speaking of so creative technologies, I know you've played in the VR space a little bit. We have a clip here, I think, that we're going to show that. Let's watch, and then we'd love to hear a little bit more about that also.
Great.
Good evening. Welcome.
If you're pregnant, well, I'm on the campaign trail. Voters are going to fall in love with us. I mean, can you imagine the pictures?
I wish I had done something.
Forever.
The domino effect is immeasurable. A complete redistribution of energy, of control, of power.
Just got some shade from a waiter for not living deliberately enough. Hashtag FML.
And have it in production lines are just...
My tragic irony. The food critic who lost his sense of taste.
Wait a second. The guy running for mayor is here?
Honey, you know how important the youth vote is for me right now. Look how many followers she has.
This fire's not contained. We could very well be burning alive soon.
Allow me to introduce you to the future.
Wait for that!
I just love seeing that because I remember you talking about it when you first started ideating on it, and I hadn't actually seen it since, so it was really fun for me to watch.
Oh my God, what was that?
I haven't watched that in a while. Oh my goodness. That, wow. So that project, this is a very good example of creative technology. So bear with me. This project, essentially, I was working at Google at the time on a team called Art, Copy, and Code. And our remit was to use new emerging technologies for creative purposes and figure out if these could be used in marketing campaigns or, really open questions. So I would get an open question like, what is VR? Is it good for anything? What should we do with this? So this project was was the result of about a year of research into what kind of use cases VR might be applicable to in the real world or in marketing and creative fields. So essentially, a lot of the work that I try to do, I try to find a blend of 3 different areas. So if there's a business case or a use case, and a business case sounds like a scary word, but it could just mean a use case that a user or an audience will appreciate and need. So identifying the need. Creative use, so something new. This is kind of in the realm of innovation. And then the technology. So generally, it doesn't have to be a new technology, but it could be a creative application of an existing technology. But I try to do those 3 things. You can kind of imagine a Venn diagram. So with this video, I had almost no budget. And to some real creative entrepreneurs, my budget was huge, but to me, it was actually like the leftover. So I did about a year of research on VR, and I found, okay, people don't have headsets and they're not going to buy them. They don't necessarily know what it is. And it's actually very hard to access unless you already have a device that's already enabled, and it's very, very easy. So what I did is I worked with an engineering team of about 2 to 3 people at Google who were volunteers, hence the no budget. So this is kind of how things get done as like an internal entrepreneur at a big company. You get really jazzed and you pitch people on stuff and get them passionately excited about your vision. So I got a few people to develop a new technology called WebVR. And they were already kind of incubating this at Google. So I had the engineers I was working with use it to create this film platform, if you will. So essentially, short answer, what that means is you can open a browser and see this film in it. And so using just your browser, you can just look with your phone and spin around and experience it like you would a 360 video. So what made it unique and different than a 360 video is that we added a level of interactivity. So it's a live action. So it's real people, real humans acting, not animated. But the interactivity, I was thinking, what kind of interactivity could we have that's simple and easy to access? And so we played around with the audio mostly. So that's why it's all about looking in and listening in. And so I was actually with my producer partner at a hotel at a business trip, and we're eating 100 desserts, probably, maybe 3. And we were just kind of like eating these pies and listening to people talk at different tables. And there was a brownie convention happening, and there was another convention happening. And we were so intrigued by just everybody that was in this bar. And we just thought to ourselves, we're like, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if you could just watch a video, but like look at a table and hear what they're saying so clearly. And so that was kind of the impetus for the style. And then we started just talking about the genre. So it's actually a commentary on climate change, different factions that are contributing to climate change. So if you really want to get deep into the storylines and all of that, it was very fun to write. And so that one, I think, was really an exercise in finding that use case where it would allow me to be creative and freely experiment with something I was particularly interested in, that normally, if you work at a big company like I do, if you just say, I want to do VR, and you don't have a real reason, you don't have a user, you don't have a way to sell it in, then nobody's going to fund it, nobody's going to support it. And so this one, to take something out as Google, like with the Google name on it, you really do need that support from the company. Otherwise, it's project by Alexis, which, is a project by me and the team, but to have like Google support it, and then we go to Sundance with it, and then we go to apply for awards. I have a defensive publication, which is like essentially like a patent on this technology that we made.
Oh, cool.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't necessarily think it'd be a good business. So it's one of these. I think the thing with creative entrepreneurship often is that entrepreneurship usually means money. Go out and make some money. Creative usually means the opposite. Ideally not true. But I think what makes my job interesting and also very challenging is that I'm trying to find that middle ground, mostly selfishly, so I can be creative and have fun.
Well, hey, we're in the boat with you. So we would love, oh my God, my mind is just your creative tech, this whole what do we call it? Intrapreneurship, right?
Yeah.
When you're entrepreneurial within the company. There's so many things to dive in.
Yeah, that's a good title.
Yes, at this point. But before we go into what brought you into this crazy, awesome creative tech within giant companies like Google, we'll start with a simpler question. What stories impacted you most growing up, so that we kind of get to know the beginning of the shapings, right? Like what impressed
before the education.
Before the education, before
pre-molded me.
Yeah, before too much came in.
So I would say, aside from the giving tree, which debatably means maybe giving too much of yourself, but we won't go down that road. So I'm torn on that one now. So I would say my grandmother. So my mother immigrated from Japan when she was in high school, and she moved here and then later married my dad. Met him during the war, Vietnam, and then they moved back. So I didn't grow up Japanese, but I grew up having this kind of distant family in Japan. And my mother is very non-traditional Japanese. She's loud, she's kind of obnoxious, she goes to the front of the line and demands, to be paid attention to. Like, this is not typical. And so she didn't fit in. So she could not wait to come to America. And her mother, apparently, who I knew, but I don't speak Japanese. So I've never actually had a conversation with her. But everybody tells me stories about her, about how she was as a young person, how she carried herself. And they tell me that I'm the same. And she has this amazing entrepreneurial story where she was essentially being raised to be a geisha madam, which at that time was a respectable career, but not to her. So to her, she said, I can do better than this. She fled to China, learned how to sew, learned how to speak Chinese, became very entrepreneurial there. And then during the war, she had to flee. she had to flee China and go back to Japan. And the only thing she was allowed to bring was one suitcase. So instead of bringing jewelry and wealth and all this kind of stuff, not that she had much, she created these, from what I understand, they were like unleavened biscuits, and filled a briefcase with it. And then on the boat, people were starving. So she ended up trading that for jewelry, and got back to Japan with a briefcase full of jewels, and then traded it all for sewing equipment, started her own sewing company, and ended up becoming pretty successful in Tokyo. And to the day of her death, she would send my mom jewelry in Cracker Jack boxes as insurance. So when my mom moved to the States, she would kind of send this jewelry. So I guess the point of that story is just kind of, I think she was ingenious. Like, she was so creative in how she survived, but also on her own terms. And so I think that story has had probably the biggest impact on me, because I feel like somewhat a little bit of pressure. Like, she sounds amazing. I should probably try harder sometimes, but also, the fact that I never really had a full conversation with her, but I just feel like the story of her is what I know. So it's kind of nice. I don't know her flaws. I didn't see them, So I'm sure she was human like everybody else, but I don't know that. So to me, she's kind of this ethereal figure.
I feel like that story should be made into a book. Maybe we should rewrite the giving, like the giving tree part 2.
This should be a book. It sounds like an epic,
Yeah. What a fantastic story. I similarly, with my great grandmother, actually have a similar thing. I knew her only when she was really, really old, couldn't talk, couldn't move, like 90 something.
Yeah.
But I was named after her, and she was from France, south of France, somewhere, an immigrant with her husband. And there was an accident, for the sake of this show. I'll say there was an accident, and she was left on her own with the son at 21 years old, and traveled as an artist, refused to kind of be anybody's, and just continued to paint and do. I don't know how she pulled it off.
Yeah.
Apparently she was wild and all these things. And I was like, I just like this woman.
Yeah.
I don't really know her.
Yeah.
But it's my namesake, and I just like her.
Yeah.
I feel
There's
very
something
connected.
about that, There's a lot in a name.
Yeah, there really is.
And in not talking, I mean, you see more, I think. You're more observant of them.
So true. So true.
Man, that's really cool.
And your story that brought you, so how he had this creativity, and so there's just so much to pull from that. But as we move further along, what brought you into the technology space? I saw Sarah Lawrence from school, right? Humanities, liberal arts, the arts, and then we move into marketing and business. So what kind of was that journey for you? When did the doors open and show you that there was this merging that was possible?
So I would say when I was younger, I was, I will say I am definitely my parents' daughter. My mother is a super creative interior designer. My father was a West Point grad, worked in finance, like MBA, also got a, master's in physics for fun, I don't get it. But the good thing is they raised me to be, just go for it. Do whatever you need, go for it. But like, figure out yourself. Don't become me. Don't become somebody else. Just figure out yourself. So I think the Sarah Lawrence piece, it was really more serendipitous. I was very, very fortunate that my father had the foresight to say, you should see this college counselor who I've heard great things about. So I was able to go to a college counselor who I didn't know anything at that time. And looking back on it, I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because she just said, what are your criteria? And I had bounced around a couple high schools. I was really into not organized sports or football or any of that, but I did competitive figure skating. So I really liked kind of performing arts and stuff like that. So she took this list. I said, I don't want fraternities. I don't want sororities. I don't want that kind of culture. I kind of want to be with a bunch of weirdos. So she put together a list of colleges and applied and got into a few. And then that one I visited and was just like struck. It's such a beautiful campus. It's the classic East Coast liberal arts school with the big brick center building, you know. So I was fortunate that I went there, because I would say that one is one of the least structured environments I think you can put a young person.
Yep.
Yet there are so many professors. The student to professor ratio is so low. So you have a lot of, you know, quote unquote supervision, but they're really your allies. You know, they become your mentors, they become your allies, your professors, and you really get to ask a lot of questions and see yourself through them. So getting to know my fellow students was just as important as my professors. And so through Sarah Lawrence, I just discovered sculpture. I loved working with my hands. I loved building things. I'm not a painter, although I painted this. I don't necessarily like 2D art, I realized. I like 3D. And then I had this sculpture professor who was making these very interesting techie sculptures. So, you know, for instance, one you walk by and some scent sprays in the air, and you know, it's triggered by you walking by. So it was kind of this really early technology-based interactive art. And I found that fascinating, even though it didn't look like art, because a lot of it had, you know, it had wires and it was weird looking, and, you know, it wasn't exactly what you would think of as art. But that the idea of doing something digital was fascinating to me. Also at that time, I had become interested in journalism. So I decided to start a magazine. So then magazines were dying. This was like 2004. And so I had a team of 12 people, and we decided to make a digital magazine. So I kind of started blending my love for tech and creativity together at that point. And then I realized I knew nothing about business after about 6 months. And I knew nobody who worked in business. I didn't know a single entrepreneur at the time. Facebook actually had reached out to recruit people. I'm sure I was one of a billion, but I remember this thought. I thought, Facebook, why on earth would I work at? It's a website. What could you possibly work on? You know, it looks like this two-dimensional surface. How many people could it take to operate something so simple? So I have no idea. I remember that thought so clearly. So I told everybody to go off and get a real job. They were all writers and photographers and artists, I guess, like me. And I went and got a job, and I was fortunate enough to get hired randomly. I honestly don't remember how I got introed or how I got this job, but I was the most junior person at Estee Lauder, and I was a person who I went into this creative, innovation team that was it was really operations, but there was this creative guy who ran it, and he just wanted a kid who knew Facebook. And so I was a kid who knew Facebook, and because it had just opened up to businesses at the time. And so I got in there and just kind of explored different technologies for Estee Lauder, and that kind of became a job where I was a very, very young person advising very senior people on, you know, Facebook is a yes, Second Life is a no, you know, and different things like that. So that kind of became a career path. I still have my sights on business school because I still have my sights on starting a business. And so I did have a brief stint in finance because that was one of those things. They're like, you should probably prove that you could do math before they let you into business school.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, fine. So I did that just out of, you know, but I ended up doing something like creative and techie even at that finance job too. I hired an engineer and built a database and did some back-end tech work. So I clearly probably should have studied engineering, I think, if I had the chance, but at the same time, I don't know if I would have felt stifled either being a pure engineer. You know?
But it sounds like you've found your path being a builder regardless, despite not studying engineering, which is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun and challenging to be a creative, entrepreneurial, you know, person, because if you're not stubborn enough, you're not going to be happy because you're not going to get anything you need. You're not going to write tableau and go to the senior executive and you know, I didn't say this, but the equivalent of fire me because I'm doing it anyways, right? You kind of have to be able
You don't
to
have a choice.
Yeah, you kind of have to just do some things and take some risks, with your career. But if you don't do that, then you're probably going to be stuck in a 9 to 5 that you're not too thrilled about, listening to somebody who doesn't understand what's in your head.
Yeah. I always feel like as creatives, we're in perpetual learning phases always. I always say if I could do college again, I should have majored in finance and accounting and marketing and all these other things that would have helped me as an actor and producer to be better. And it's just, I would love to be proficient at all of the things.
We learn along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, we form coalitions of people who can help us.
Yeah,
right.
We're not good at, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I realize I can learn a lot about a lot, but it doesn't mean I'm good at it.
Right. Right.
So big choice, right? When you're an entrepreneurial creative, that's kind of in your blood. You want to own your own projects. And even when it's the hardest thing, there's so many people I just think we're nuts. And believe half the days I look in the mirror and I'm like, you are nuts. I don't know what you're thinking on a regular basis. But you made a choice to work with a larger, this entrepreneurial side within highly innovative organizations. I love Google's innovation strategy and how they work with companies. I find it fascinating. I don't actually understand the details of it. So if you could just, what is that like? I know the regular entrepreneurial, the more typical side, but what is it within the company? How do we see this? How does that happen?
So I forgot my caveat that all of my opinions are my own and not that of Google or the companies that I work for. So I would say I don't know if I actively made the choice to be an entrepreneur or not. I think, you always meet these people who seem like they get up at 6 a.m, they go for a run, they come back, they drink green juice, then they do something that's personal for 5 minutes, read the news. I am not like that. And so I am very focused and then I'm really unfocused. And I think I'm sure a lot of creative people can relate to that because, we need some time for our brain to kind of space out and then think of something else. And so that's really no different. I would say what's challenging in the entrepreneurial environment in general and in the corporate environment is that I always thought that as an entrepreneur, and I was starting my company, I would have to do, not just learn, but do all of the things I really didn't want to do, like accounting, and keeping track of things. I'm not an incredibly organized person. However, I'm very good at identifying other people who are organized. And so part of me was kind of waiting for this perfect team to form. And I think that right or wrongly, I have found that perfect team several times within organizations. And it's just been nice because it's not like a life or death situation. So I would say within a big company, you get frustrated, but you're going to get that as an entrepreneur outside anyways.
Yeah.
I like the fact that anything can happen, especially a company like Google. This does not apply to all companies, but anything can happen. Somebody, I could be super interested in VR, and then all of a sudden VR becomes a really big deal, and I'm swept into a new team to work on VR. This kind of stuff can happen at Google, whereas if I was the 100% owner of my VR company, and then the world decides they hate VR, that's really hard. So there's no real backup plan.
Yeah.
And I honestly used to think that this was a weakness to be an entrepreneur versus an entrepreneur. And I still fight against my own sort of limitations in thinking about certain things, but doing all these interesting things at a big company has given me access to more information, more people than I could have probably done alone without some serious hustle. And I think that working at a big company, going back to kind of my original thought, has given me that creative space. I can zone out for a little while. and my whole company doesn't go under because of it.
Mm.
I can kind of zone out and I can say, you know what, I'd like to take some time to figure out if, you know, NASA's the right partner or if VR is the right tech. And I can get that kind of support to do that. So it allows me as a creative person to just have a little more space to have fun.
Definitely.
Do you find that being in a company, that because of this, it's forced you to have more conviction with your ideas before you kind of dive into them, because you have accountability to your team? And like you said, you have different members of the team holding each other up and carrying different weights in different places.
So it's hard for me to compare how this would be outside of the company, because, you know, my opinion has always been it's going to be hard no matter where I am. I'm going to have to be constantly pitching, constantly putting myself out there, constantly convincing people of my reputation and my ideas and the company's reputation, the company's ideas. And, you know, so I would say it's probably easier just to be like, hi, I work at Google. And then everyone's like, oh, I've heard of that. You know, that's fantastic. So that's, you know, kind of nice. But internally, yes, I think that's where it gets tricky, because I don't know, like, would I be more successful outside of Google? Sometimes, I think so. Sometimes. Would I be happier if I had full ownership over something, like my own company with, you know, I could hire anybody that I wanted to, theoretically, if they want to come work for me? Sure, probably sometimes. But I think for the time being, I'm kind of okay with it being a comfortable place to play for now, you know. And the longer I am at the same company, so I'm going on 5.5 years at Google, and the longer I'm here, I think the more I'm learning how to get things done much easier than I could have before. And when I hit a roadblock, it's a huge company. Just shift, you know, just go find some other people who are really jazzed about my ideas. Like, there are always people who are ready to jump in with you. You just have to find them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a unique thing about Google specifically. It's a huge company, so it has all the same kind of things that you would hear about any big company, but they're smart, and they're like probably a lot of bored people who are super smart. And if you come and you're like, hey, let's do this project together, that kind of thing can happen. So it feels more like a college.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's really cool.
They keep that. It's so hard. I mean, so many organizations, we talk about why companies in general, like when I look at even independent small businesses, right? I'll always be, you know, in disruptive climates, especially, like forge alliances.
Yeah.
What the large companies do, right? Yeah. The large companies, that's what you're talking about. It's like a little bit of a safety net. So if you get hit on the left, you can shift, you can pivot more easily when you share some of your resources, share services, share manpower.
Yeah.
Share some of your financials. And all of a sudden you become a lot more resilient, like some of these fantastic organizations that do it in more of an acquisition sort of model.
Right.
But, there's so much, but I'm so interested. Google does fascinate me in that way, because your culture, it's hard. It's very hard. A lot of organizations are very nervous about giving creative freedom.
Oh, yes. Especially to people who are in the reporting chain below them.
Yes. Yeah.
That's probably so terrifying.
It's just against our cultural stories, right? The idea is I have to micromanage you. You don't actually want to be here. I have to force you into doing everything. Yeah. And the newer cultures that are so much more innovative they practice a different story. Mm-hmm. And so do you see, I mean, that in kind of the environment that you're given as a creative within Google, what does that look like? Do you have time to kind of space out and have more control over your schedule? Like, is there a trust that's kind of, what little things happen within the organization that gave you a little bit more breathing room as a creative?
Well, and to add on to that, just within our theme, in talking about alpha culture versus beta culture, are one of those more dominant, I would imagine, in a space, to your point, where you're surrounded by a lot of really smart people who do have the talents and the skill sets and the capabilities to make things happen. So what does that look like within your work life?
So I would say a lot of it is Google culture, the way that they established a culture from the beginning. It is like a college. Mm-hmm. So the original idea is that everybody's equal. Now, it's a huge company, so it has grown into something a little more traditional. I'm not going to say that because nobody wants me to say that out loud, probably. But it is. It's become a big company, So there is a need to hire for specific types of roles that, are not necessarily entrepreneurial. You can't have a big successful organization run by a bunch of independent spirits. That doesn't really breed a whole lot of collaboration when everybody wants to be the boss or wants to have the idea or wants to be the one to send the email. So I think Google is interesting, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But we have growing pains too. So, but then you get this kind of culture clash when you hire people from traditional companies who are used to saying, well, I'm a director, and therefore I need the answers, first of all, and I'll tell you the answers when I'm ready. And then when I tell you the answers, I want you to act and get it done today. So, I think that's the kind of stuff that makes working at big companies so miserable for most people, is that they don't have autonomy, they don't have control, and they really don't have a say. And I think a huge barrier to getting what you need as an entrepreneurial type person is asking for it and not settling for anything else. And I rub people the wrong way all the time. I'm not always a super popular person. People don't always open their doors, and managers are not always like, oh good, Alexis is gonna decide she doesn't like my idea today. Like, that's not great. That's not a whole lot of fun to manage. So I understand that, and I'm okay with it. But yeah, I'm learning how to become a better employee. And a lot of it is just communicating. But I think in general, the message I would say is you need allies. You need people in the company who can, when you get stubborn in a meeting and you're like, no, this is right, and you're diplomatic about it, of course, you have very senior level allies who can support you. And I think in the real world, that's also the case. And seniority is measured in different ways. They could be an expert in something. They could be well established in something. They could just have really good connections. Everybody has a different type of leadership, or a different way that they establish themselves as an important mentor to you. And so I have a network of people at Google who think I'm pretty cool. And so when I get a little rambunctious, they're like, nah, just listen to her. She knows what she's talking about. Or they'll say, I don't know about this idea, Alexis. This one's maybe not so great. So I think having those allies is really important. And then also just knowing that it's okay, right? It's okay to not be the perfect peg in a hole, right? It's okay. And I think people should be okay being more human. I mean, I feel so much pressure to just nod my head sometimes and not speak my mind. And I really have to fight hard against when it's worth speaking up and when it's not. Because it's not always big issues. Sometimes it's just that the analytics report, it just has to be good enough. But in my mind, I'm thinking, these numbers are meaningless when they're printed like this. We need to show this chart and that chart and this chart, and we need to show our failures, and so we can be better, And I think when you're in a small environment, people want that, in a leader. They want people like that because you're going to fail in the market if you're not like that. But at a big company, I think we have so much room. We have so much wiggle room that, if our marketing campaign drives 75% of what we wanted, that's still probably a big marketing campaign.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's where I struggles when I want to, you know, fight back and be like, this isn't good enough. But, you know, the big company, I think, just wants you to be consistent and good enough.
Hmm. Do you find that there is more of this kind of beta concept that is at the organization, or is there a little bit of shift as things get bigger, right? We do kind of go back to our older structures.
Yeah, I would say the first team I was on was very googly and very beta, as you would call it. Extremely collaborative. I was a middle manager type on the team, but you know, I could recruit people to my cause and we could do something together. And we were all equal. And I have always tried to operate that way because really the projects I work on, especially, I'm not the expert in the room. I'm really good at being the dumbest person in the room. And that's kind of, I think, why I'm able to work with, you know, brilliant people or engineers and have them speak whatever language they're speaking at the moment, but still have us align on something and move forward. You know, I would say that beta culture gets expressed when people are listening to each other and they're able to talk through different things and understand when collaboration is actually happening and when it's not. I think it's so easy for everyone to go into a meeting and say, nod their heads, oh yeah, we're all on the same page, we're aligned, and then go in completely different directions and then come back and not have done anything and been like, I was confused and I didn't ask questions.
Oh my God.
You know, I think it happens all the time. And that can be really frustrating for a team. So that's where this kind of collaborative, you know, flat organization can break down, because the good thing about having that kind of single leader is they are accountable, they're responsible for the outcome, and they'll hound you for it. So there's definitely, like, I don't think either or one or the other is better. I do think that they're both in all of us, and we should really be balancing them and knowing when, you know, if you notice everybody looks confused in a meeting, ask the question, like, hey, I'm confused a little bit. Can we circle back on this? Like, I know we're out of time. I hate that. Like, we're out of time, and therefore we've definitely come to an agreement. You know, it's like, we'll just circle back next week.
Yeah,
exactly. So, I would say though, the alpha culture, I definitely experienced that at previous jobs, like working in finance, working in gaming, working in electronic arts, working in tech. I've always worked with men, and now more women, but also there is still that pressure, kind of like, you know, your character Delta that's talking about, you know, she comes from this very alpha culture and feels this need. I mean, when I first got to Google, I definitely had to be broken in a little bit. I was super rough around the edges. I was very direct, not diplomatic at all, never smiled. Yes, because that's what I had to do to kind of live life in these other companies. And I was good at it, and I was successful in those companies. And I think my first 2 years at Google, I was much less successful here, because that's not received well.
Right.
You know, and yeah, Google's always criticized as being too touchy-feely, but in general,
they seem to do just fine for themselves, considering. And when did the alpha kind of came in, but coming from Sarah Lawrence, humanities, culture. So were you a little bit, so we've got Leanie too, right? We kind of play with these two opposite characters.
Yeah.
And Leanie's like, I just have a big heart. And like, doesn't everybody just want to like talk to each other, right? Kind of the beta problem where it's just like, we just love each other and we're just going to love each other. Now we're collaborating. It's like, yeah,
right.
But.
Well, that's kind of where I was going also from what you were talking about with alpha beta was leadership styles. And I don't know if this is so much a male female thing as I think just individuals, it's like a humankind thing, but typically women's leadership, not all women, but women more so than men, have leadership styles that sometimes reflect more of a vulnerability or more of a Leanie, which is like, smile and like, let's be a team and we're all in this together. And, you know, like the cheery, upbeat leadership style that I think sometimes has to be suppressed in certain industries or certain leadership roles to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of interesting for you going the other way of learning that you could open up more and you didn't have to be so rigid or adaptive to those things that you had learned in other roles.
Yeah. But there was there a transition before? Wait, hold on. I'm like getting back. So Sarah Lawrence, where were we at? More on the beta and more?
Okay, so I was a competitive figure skater.
Okay.
And a ballerina for 12 years.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was definitely, I mean, you're alone on the ice. That's it. You're getting the gold or you're not getting anything. So I grew up very competitive, very intense person. The sculpture, I think, allowed me to be more expressive because I've also been a very emotional person. Like I have very deep feelings about things and I used to overthink absolutely everything. And every once in a while I still do. But I always had that in me. So yeah, I would say the Sarah Lawrence and the art really helped me express some of these emotions and get these things out. And sculpture is really collaborative. Like you're all making your own piece. There isn't, oh, you're stealing my idea. There's like a little bit of that, but it's pretty hard to steal a sculpture idea and not get noticed. You build the same thing. It's kind of weird. So it was mostly, about learning tools and how to use materials. And then you see somebody doing something and you have to build these things in a very public space, in the studios. And so people will come up to me and say like, oh, what are you doing? Pressing your face into that block of concrete. That's a really weird thing to do. And I'm like, it's not working. Like this was pretty much what Sarah Lawrence was like, which was freeing for me as like a complete rigid, obsessive person. And so then going into kind of, I think I'm more kind of the person I was then now than I was in the middle when I was just kind of feeling things out and working in different jobs in different cultures. Estee Lauder was nuts. I was on a techie team and I've always been kind of like a techie nerd. So that I think that's a nice excuse to be a little quirky. But Estee Lauder, these women would come in with like gold suits with collars, like Devil Wears Prada. It was intense. And I remember I talked to this one woman, she was a director of marketing. And I said, oh, you went to business school? I really want to go to business school. And she says, oh, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I think I was trying to move to her team. And I was like, oh, I'd love to be where you are. I mean, I don't know what that means, right? But she looks at me with the snootiest face and she's like, it's going to take you a lot longer than that. I went to Stern. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but okay. And, that's NYU. So she was so like condescending. And I mean, I'm sure it took her a long time to get there, but I remember like thinking, oh God, am I not good enough? Right. Like, do I have to be like her? Should I start condescending people? And when I get that degree, am I going to be all like hoity-toity about it, that nobody could get that degree but me? So I don't know, I'm kind of on a tangent, but I would say that shift definitely happened around that time when I went to Estee Lauder, because I noticed these were like not strong women. They were like badass bitches and I had to be one, So I think that pressure was just, I didn't like it, but I tried and people didn't respond well. So I was very confused because I'm like, come on, give me a break. Yeah, what do you want from me? Like, I'm just doing what your example is. Yeah. But yeah, I think the world's changing. I think with tech, I think with social media, kids these days and their social media, I do think that it matters a lot. I see a lot of young people, I feel like a little old fogey when I say things like this, but a lot of like the youths are wearing these tiny little crop tops and, little shorts, and like they don't have perfect figures. And I think that's great because they're just being themselves and whatever. And I think that is happening inside and out, where, we're allowed to bring a little more humanity to things as influencers who are just normal people. And, people are able to make series like this to express like a woman's perspective on business. Like, who knew? And I think the more access to examples young women have, I think that the more humanity will be brought into the workplace, which is great.
Yeah. And, you know, you brought up something that's so important too, that I know Adrienne and I both run into and are
probably thinking of the same line right now.
you know, because we look at the goal of empowering women and some of the barriers that have come that are very real and oftentimes not talked about because they're subconscious. So we like to think, no, I'm supportive. No, I'm totally supportive. Yeah, I'm supportive. Yeah. No, but I'm kind of not.
Like,
you know,
not right now.
Right.
Yeah.
In this moment, but I worked extra hard. And so like I've had that too, especially from I didn't find empowering female mentors until a little bit later in my life. Some of the earlier mentors that came across my plate were actually very harsh and yeah, let's just say very similar to your experience at the Estee Lauder, right? Running into agents that just like, you know, you're not good enough, essentially, is the message, because so few women could actually make strides in the field. And it was so hard. So there's just a lot of anger, right? That's kind of carried from that journey.
Right.
And well, it's interesting that was your experience in a beauty industry.
Yeah.
And I think Carly and I talk about this all the time, which is, you know, I find it much easier to approach a man that I not want something from, but that I admire and can mentor and kind of guide me and kind of ask for that, versus approaching a woman who I will just like crush over and be like, I just think you're amazing. And I just, I don't always know how to approach women, because sometimes there is that like cold shoulder of like, why do you think you get to be where I am? I worked hard to get here and I'm so afraid someone might try and take it from me.
Yeah.
Which is just not productive and helpful in bringing women into supporting each other on entrepreneurial ventures and business positions and helping us rise together.
Yeah.
I hear you. I do think there are still more men than women in positions of power. So that's the biggest problem, is that we just don't have the numbers. We don't have the number of women we can go talk to. And then if you do, she probably has the rest of the women in the organization trying to, you know, suck up to her as well. And so sometimes it's not the most senior women who become your best allies. And I like to use the term ally because they're really like business friends. You know, they know you well enough that there's trust, and they will stick their necks out for you more than, you know, a mentor would. A mentor is kind of, you know, someone you crush over. It's somebody who you can look up to. You don't really have to talk to them much. You just need a couple seeds, be able to ask them some questions, but not really expect them to do anything for you. And I think this gets a lot easier as you know, gain more experience and get a little older, because you're able to give back in some ways, you know, even if it's helping with quote unquote homework, you know, like I've done a ton of web analytics. And so now that especially this year during COVID, everyone's going online and all these people are like, I have never looked at Google Analytics before. I've never really had to see what site traffic is. Like, what's that? And, you know, I'm really able to help a lot of people, because to me, it's like second nature. I do this all the time. So I can just show them, oh, make this chart like this. You're going to want to look at sessions, not page views, because of this problem, you know, with the data or whatever. And I think with that kind of stuff, you know, you can kind of give back in different ways. So I like the term allies, because it kind of takes the gender out of the equation.
I like that.
And it also implies that these are people who you're an ally to as well. You can give back, and as you all grow, they will become more important in your life. They will become more important in their organizations. They will have more connections as well as you. And so it just becomes part of your network.
Yeah.
But I think having like these people you crush on, I think this was one of the mistakes I regret the most, is I was never a very good fan. Even as a little girl, I never had celebrity crushes or anything. It was just, I'm gonna do it on my own and figure it all out. And, I really now looking back and looking forward, I try to find women and I try to find their qualities that I can look up to in women and men. I just look harder for it. So, I have friends who are my age or younger than I am now who say insightful things. And I'm kind of like, oh, totally. And they're my mentor for that moment,
Yeah.
I think if you just look for those things, you'll find them and you can follow whatever you need.
It's great. And as we're kind of on this note, and we're coming up on the hour too. Adri, I wanted to kind of close out with a leadership question, but if we wanted to ask one other thing, I'm not sure if there's another question that you have.
Go for it.
So we talk a lot about kind of mentoring generally each other in the same way that, you're talking about. It's not, it's just, we all have stories to share and it's more helpful and we're not on the journey alone when we hear those stories from other people and know that we're sharing in certain challenges. But for you, your leadership journey, what have you kind of learned about being an effective leader? Like what do you think makes an effective leader, and what do you work on in your own life and in your own work to kind of bring that forward?
I mean, that's a big question because I'm still on that journey, and I fall off of that journey too all the time.
It's hard, yeah.
I would say, I think what's been most important for me is, I hope this doesn't sound trite, but it really failing, like accepting. Sometimes I go for something and I fail, and I'm not talking about a project launches and does this. It's, stuff with like mentorships. I had a you call an angel, which is a super senior person who can pick you up out of, chaos and put you down in the organization. And I didn't screw it up, but I feel like I did, right? So there are kind of these, like I put a lot of weight on certain things in that type of relationship. But I think these little failures that happen that are very subtle, that can really damage your confidence, because those things just happen. Like you have a bad performance review, or you didn't get the funding for something that you really thought you were going to, or they pulled it, or whatever. Like these little unexpected upsets. I think what I've learned the most is how to weather those things and how to not take it on as like a personal failure. Like I think as a younger person, it's so easy just to say, oh, it's me. I have a part in everything, of course, obviously, but if you don't take it on and you don't carry it, you're really, really much better at moving forward and kind of being there for other people.
I think that is fantastic. The failure, largely, when you say failure too, like you said, it's beyond projects. What I hear is also, it's okay to be wrong. I feel like that's just the huge lesson, that we're working together. And as women, like this isn't easy. Being human isn't easy. Developing things, innovating, living in this world is not easy. And we're doing the best that we can. Hopefully, most of us, I think, show up trying the best that we can, but we're so scared of being wrong.
I think it's because we focus inward too much.
Yeah.
If we're constantly listening and looking at other people and following other people's leads that we appreciate and respect, then it won't be so much about us. And I think that's where we just need to get out of ourselves a little bit.
Great. That is yes.
Good point. Well, and with that, if there was a final piece of advice that you would give to up and coming youth or generations interested in pursuing entrepreneurial ventures, whether it's in the tech field or something else, what would you say?
Just keep moving. Just keep trying stuff. That's really it. It'll end somewhere.
Be okay to fail and just keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing, Alexis. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
The time always goes by so quickly, but we really appreciate all the stories and the counsel. It's super helpful. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your time. It was great, and hopefully we will see you and talk to you again soon.
Yeah, wait, if people want to follow your new ventures, Where do we go? So if there's another Tabble or like where do we go?
I will post it on my Twitter or my LinkedIn. Any of my stuff usually goes up there.
Okay, great. Because yeah, I'm gonna that Tabble thing. I'm gonna go look at it afterwards.
Yeah.
It was a really fun video. All right, great. Thank you so much, Alexa.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
All right.
Wrapping up. Okay,
Great.
well,
Exciting stuff.
Yes, really.
I
know.
I'm like, wait, creative technology. I feel like this is our field too. We can do this. We can make series and movies and do this. So
it is definitely our field. All right. Well, thank you to everyone for watching. It was great to have you here today, and we will see you in actually 2 weeks. Right, Adri? We'll be back.
Yes.
In about 2 weeks. Excellent. My name is Carly Marcel. I am I'm a producer and the founder of the Machu Team Network, which you can find out more about those two things at carlymarcel.com.
And I am Adriana Leonard, an actor, writer, producer. You can find out everything about me at adrianaleonard.com. Make sure you are subscribed to betatheseries.com. Watch our trailer, share it, love it. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.